Hello, everybody, and welcome to Shaman Sisters Sessions, episode 144. I am Michelle Hawk, and I'm here not only with my wonderful shaman sister, Katherine Bird, but also my shaman sister, Kristen Von Foxx. And we are so happy, Kristen, to welcome you here to our podcast today. We're going to be talking about near-death experiences and ancestral healing. I'll take a moment to introduce you so people can hear a little bit about what you're up to and all the many things that you're up to. Kristen and I, we actually know each other since what, 2013 or something? 2013, 2014? It's been a while. Yeah. And we became connected through another shamanic practitioner friend, and we hit it off and have been in wonderful community since then. Kristen, I have so much respect for her as a practitioner and as a wonderful human. She has spent the last 15 years speaking, writing, and teaching about her shamanic practice, about different aspects of healing and becoming. She has guided thousands of people to break free from trauma, ancestral patterns, and hidden blockages that keep them from living fully aligned, empowered lives. She helps clients heal unconscious patterns that have held them back from love, fulfilling relationships, career success, and life purpose. And she uses a unique blend of clinical psychotherapy and ancient shamanic healing modalities. Through this work, her clients reclaim their lost energy from childhood, past life traumas, ancestral cycles, and they rediscover confidence, passion, clarity, and joy while attracting relationships and experiences that they desire in their life. So we are here to talk with Kristen today about some really powerful healing and ancestral work and how that's been coming up for you. So Kristen, thank you so much for joining us. It's wonderful to have you here.
Yeah, it's so nice to be here with you today too.
Absolutely. I want to dive right into this is our first time talking about near-death experiences on this podcast. And so I'd love to, we'll get there in just one moment, but I'd love to hear just a little bit of background about how did you get into your shamanic healing practice? Can you walk us through a little of your awakening journey and becoming, because I know that's so present for so many of our audience members.
Absolutely. Well, I think like all of us, we come to the healing when we really need it ourselves. All
Mhm.
of my training was in clinical psychotherapy. I was in school completing my master's degree to be a creative arts therapist. And it was during that time that I had reconnected with someone who I met when I was 17 at Colonial Williamsburg in West Virginia. I had met this man. As soon as I saw him, I just felt this instant connection, that soulmate connection that you just can't turn off and you feel magnetically drawn to that person. Well, I had that experience when I was 17 and we stayed in touch for 8 years as pen pals. And he came to visit me when I was finishing up graduate school. And during that time, he was wanting to convince me that we should continue our relationship, get married, and we ended up getting married. He moved to the States from Scotland, which was where he was from, where he had been living. And we had a whirlwind relationship that taught me quite a bit. I think that relationships teach us quite a bit. I think that that's our number one way of learning in this world. At least it's been my experience. And during that relationship, we were together. He emptied my bank account, fled the country, and I was left brokenhearted, feeling like a shell of who I used to be. And I turned to all of the psychotherapeutic tools that I had learned in school, and nothing really helped to heal me because it felt like my soul was broken. It felt like all of the parts of joy, compassion just left. They were gone and I couldn't access them. And that set me on a journey to learn how to actually deeply, truly heal my soul. And that's when I began to learn and study with shamanic practitioners all over the world. I traveled the world looking for the soul healing tools and discovered shamanism, and specifically a practice called soul retrieval, which is where you go through trauma that part of your soul can dissociate and disconnect. And that in psychotherapy, we just talk about what that wound is, and we don't necessarily get the power back, but we build up the rest of the person's healthy sense of ego. And that's where I was stuck with the psychotherapeutic tools. I could talk about for years, but I wasn't actually feeling a shift and feeling different. And once I began to integrate the shamanic tools and had soul retrieval done, it felt like the parts of me that had left truly came. And that's when I began to feel the sparkle of who I used to be before the trauma happened. And it was through layers of doing the shamanic healing work on myself, I began to experience huge shifts, even going back further in my childhood, further into deeper wounds I had before that relationship that broke me, and began to see that that was a bigger shift for myself and for my clients. And then I had this moment, there was a fork in the road, and I could have gone towards credentials and continuing my path and my doctorate to become a psychotherapist, or take the tools that I learned as I graduated with the degree to move in a new direction of shamanism. And that's the path that I chose. And that's sort of what woke me up. That heartbreak that broke me open allowed me to find a different way.
Mhm. Beautiful. Thank you so
That's
much
amazing.
for.
Thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
Yeah, really good. I know that I have a lot of clients that are therapists, and one of the things that they talk about is, why didn't we learn this stuff? Well, this is changing things, and this is bringing in all of these missing pieces that I didn't have in my practice, that I wasn't bringing to my clients. I've had some therapists say, I feel like bad about the fact that I didn't have these tools at certain times with certain people. I could have done a better job. I think it feels like such an important piece to be able to integrate both of these, to be able to take the tools that we know from Western. We've talked about this before. We had another guest who was a therapist on recently, and we talked about this before, about how we can integrate these tools together, and how we know that there are Western concepts and practices and techniques and all of these things that are really helpful and supportive. And then when we bring in these other pieces, it's like putting the whole picture together. So it's really beautiful that you found that in the midst of, I think, the crisis that you can't contain is where you find the magic that has been waiting for you.
Mhm.
Absolutely. It's the dark night of the soul, and it cracks us open to find a better way. I truly believe that those dark nights come, and I believe that we have asked on another plane for those experiences to happen in life, even if we don't remember that we requested them, that they are really here to redirect us to our true path and our true north.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. And I know, and we've talked about a lot of different ways that people go through awakening experiences. Kat and I have shared both of our awakening journeys on the podcast before, and our guests, we usually have some conversation about that too. But yeah, the dark night of the soul is definitely like the cracking open in whatever form it takes. I know a lot of people can relate to that. And then also, we have this kind of dance between the personal and collective experience of how we're experience of how we have these ruptures happening of, okay, a person comes in and there's a breaking of an illusion or some kind of remembrance that happens. We're usually tuning in with not only things from this particular earth walk, but experiences from other incarnations as well, and things in our bloodline. And I know that ancestral healing is a big component of your work, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about your near-death experience, because I know that was a tremendously pivotal moment, another big initiation and awakening moment for you. So can you please tell us about that, and we'll get into what that sparked and where you're going with it.
Absolutely. So let me give you a little bit of backstory to put it into context so it makes sense.
Absolutely.
So
Please.
as we talked about, relationships for me have been a catalyst to really break me open. And I feel like we all get those moments, and maybe the two of you and anyone who's listening resonates with this. We sometimes get that intuitive tap on the shoulder of, hey, spirit's trying to give us some guidance or a lesson. And if we don't listen to that, it becomes sort of like a smack. And then if we don't listen to that, eventually we get the 2x4 that smacks us across the face and really wakes us up. And I feel like my near-death experience was that, because I was experiencing another major relationship. I was married twice, and third time's the charm. Just kidding. I was married twice, and my second partner, who also cracked me open, he couldn't have been more different than my family. And I come from a family of fundamentalist Christians. They are on a very different end of the spectrum to some of the tools that I jive with and that I work with through the shamanic realm. And we've not been in contact for the last 14 years because I have pursued shamanism. Anyway, I met a man who, again, that soul connection, that sparkle, really feeling that intense pull towards him. And he was Jamaican. He was covered in tattoos. He had the same birthday as my mom. His mother had almost the same birthday as my dad, and was like the personality of my dad and my sister rolled into one. And we were just magnetically drawn to each other, and we dove into deep relationship. And I swear that we got married so that we could just trigger all of our ancestral curses that we didn't know that we had, so that everything could bubble up. And I felt called. My guides were like, you have to marry this man. So I was the one that proposed to him. And we decided to get married. And that's when everything began to shift, right around the time of the engagement. Him and his mother had some dynamics. She became almost like a intrusive third party in the relationship, and it was very difficult to navigate. And she triggered all of my childhood wounds. I saw my ex-husband go into a state that reminded me of my childhood, where my father was like that scary, domineering, controlling character. And I could see that playing out through his mom. I could see all of her wounds of feeling rejected, that I felt too. It was just like my childhood experience. And the three of us were just playing out all of these dynamics that I had seen my parents play out, and that I had experienced throughout my childhood. And I could almost see this version of my ex-husband was my inner child before I broke free and found shamanism and sort of left the Christian cult that I grew up in. And so we all came together to do this dance to bring everything to the surface. And I remember I was working with one of my Navajo elders out on the res in Arizona, and he did something called a blackening ceremony to clear negative energy. And part of that process was to do some prayers, bathe myself in these sacred plants. And the medicine is that where lightning has struck, they gather the plants and they burn and blacken them. They grind them up. They cover you and your body, all of your skin, with sheep's fat, and then they cover you with the herbs. And then you put on some layers and you go into isolation for several days. The first time I did this ceremony, it was 3 days, and I was in isolation. I couldn't shower, couldn't wash it off, had to be in prayer to reflect on my life. And the second time I did this ceremony, I was honoring it during the same time, the solstice the next year later. I was called to do that ceremony again to clear some of this energy, because COVID happened in between. It felt like a lot of energy was getting into me, and I needed to clear that story. And during that blackening ceremony, the second time I did it, every night in my dreams, my guides handed me divorce papers and said, you have to leave this relationship. So we consciously decoupled. He was open to the divorce. I went on my own to work on all that it brought up to the surface. We did as much as we could together. And now it was time for me to focus on my healing and everything it trudged up on my end that I needed to take responsibility for, to clear, to have healthier, happier relationships. Well, I am 14 generations from Pocahontas. You can see one of my ancestors here. She's 7 generations between us. I got a hold of the oral traditions of the Powhatan people, which is Pocahontas's lineage, who is, Pocahontas is 14 generations from me. And I read her true story, and it reminded me of all of these things I experienced in childhood wounds, childhood trauma. I could see that played out in my dad's life, in my sister's life, in my life. And I'm sure many more generations in between that lineage, as far back to Pocahontas. And I was recognizing these patterns in my marriage. And I knew in my soul I needed to go and make amends and clear these patterns. The call was to go to my ancestral waterways, to go where my ancestors lived at that time, which was the colonial Williamsburg, West Virginia, the first place I met my first ex-husband, by the way. It all comes back full circle. So I went there with a new man that I had met. We were friends at the time, and we went kayaking because I loved kayaking on the waterways. And it was on the 5th day after I showed up with prayers, with my rattle, with my drums, just singing to the ancestors, giving offerings to the water. I didn't really know exactly why I was there, but I just needed to be there for something powerful. It felt like if I showed up and did this work, something was going to happen, and I didn't know what that was going to be. I, of course, didn't think that I was going to have a near-death experience. Well, on the 5th day, I had an ovarian cyst I didn't know I had that ruptured. And it felt like an internal explosion, almost like if someone threw a water balloon and exploded inside of your body. And all of a sudden, my face went pale. my partner, he's now my partner, was there with me on a kayak on the river fishing. And he said that all of the blood drained from my face. And at that moment, he knew that something was deeply wrong. And I grasped my side and I said, something ruptured. And I think I'm going to faint. And then I went unconscious. When you go unconscious, your body goes to the side and then the kayak flips. So the last thing I saw was the tunnel vision of just the blue of my kayak going sideways and the tunnel vision of the water. And I went and dove in. And I was conscious of that moment. And I said, this is how I die. I've died now. And immediately I was transported to another dimension. I call it the land of lights and colors. And I met my ancestors there. And my ancestor, this male ancestor who I met, was so calm, so excited to see me. And he could sense my panic that I believed I had just died. And I saw his face so close. I saw every little wrinkle in his face. And he just said, Kristen, you're not going to die today. You're here to be activated. And he reached out and he touched my solar plexus and all of my cells lit up into bliss. Then my Christian mindset came in, made that evil somehow, because it felt like this orgasmic experience that almost felt sexual, even it was non-sexual in nature. And the guides, the ancestors came in and they cleared the thought and said, that's not truth. Let that go. That's not what's happening here. And they just wisped it away, allowed the thought to completely leave. And at that point, I surrendered. I felt my arms go out to the sides, and there was an activation that happened through all of my cells and a deep download and knowing that I can't quite put into words. I felt like I had all of this information come to me at once, but then I can't actually remember and recall all of it or any of it. Besides, they told me that it was important for me to go back and I couldn't stay there. And the message was, you have to help other people heal their ancestral lineage. Right before the near-death experience, I had a Pocahontas dream catcher and it shattered right when I got out of the car. And when it broke, I heard, it broke, you broke it. And it felt like it was this exciting, I broke the curse or I broke the cycle. And when I had the rupture, it felt like it was a rupture of breaking free. It was on my right side, which is the side of my Pocahontas lineage, which, you know, if you're into energy, the right side is the masculine and the left side is the feminine. And so with this message, I was brought back to my body very slowly. I heard a voice that was all the way down a hallway to the left. There was a door. And through that door was a voice that kept repeating, come back, come back, come back. And that moment, when I came back, I actually felt like I was coming out of a medicine ceremony. I pictured myself in Brooklyn coming back into toad medicine, a bufu medicine ceremony. That's what it felt like, that state of consciousness that I was coming back from. But I opened my eyes and I saw the rushing cold river. I saw the blue of the kayak. I was soaking wet and shivering. And that's when I knew, oh, this is where I was. And the pain in my body was so intense. I kept closing my eyes to drift back to that place because it was so peaceful and so light and just filled with love, just some deep compassion that you can only get a twinkle of when you're in a plant ceremony. If any of you have done that deeper work, it felt like that, but just more expansive and continuous. And it kept trying to go back there. And my partner kept trying to bring me back. His experience was that when I flipped in the kayak, he jumped out of his kayak into the rushing river that was quite deep because he had been fishing there. But there was a cliffside that was right beside us. So there was no way out to the side. There was no land to get to. And that cliff that went down underwater had a foothold that he said he doesn't think he could ever recreate this, but he stepped out onto a foothold out of nowhere. His boat went down the river and his fishing wire got caught on a fallen tree. And that's good because it had our cell phones in it, our only way of communication in a different state because we're not from Virginia. And he was with me. He's trained as a veteran and he used all the tools he had to use in Iraq and was able to monitor me. But he said there was a period of several minutes where he thought I was dead, but he stayed with me. He rubbed my sternum. He kept with me, but the boat was held a couple hundred miles down or yards, I'm sorry, down the river waiting for us. And he got me back into my boat so that when I was able to come to, I was safe and he was there making sure that I could breathe. So that was the activation.
Wow. Anybody else getting full of all you that listening out there, anyone else getting full body chills? Yeah. I know there's a lot to be with there. I just kind of want to let it be for a moment. And so as you are listening in and tuning in, I'm inviting you to feel whatever sensations are arising in your body, whatever knowingness is arising in your energy, because this is a very potent medicine that Kristen is sharing with us and in sharing this story. And this is part of the activation that she received. She's offering and sharing as medicine with her community by bringing this back into this plane of existence. And I want to highlight that of this is part of when people go on journeys and when people receive really significant initiations and activations, part of the anchoring of that medicine is the storytelling and the sharing when it's appropriate to do so. So Kristen, thank you so much for sharing about this experience that you had. And yeah. Hmm.
So I'm curious, Kristen, after what was the integration process in the just in the short term after this? Like how did you manage? I'm sure you were then taken to the hospital. You were having to like go through being in, I'm just assuming like a medical system at that point and all of these pieces. how were how are you feeling? Do you feel like it was because you had these experiences with ceremony, with medicine, that those were helping you to understand and be able to integrate this and be in your body? Because this sounds like something that would be very challenging for a lot of people to even be able to sit with in the immediate aftermath. What was that like for you?
I'm not gonna lie, it's been about 3.5 years since then. It's taken that amount of time that's passed to really integrate it and ground that. I resisted going to the hospital because I didn't have health insurance at the time. And afterwards, I begged my partner, I said, don't you dare take me to the hospital unless XYZ symptoms happen and I'm about to die. And I went through a period where I was still struggling, and we got back to New York afterwards. I needed to do a soul retrieval for myself because part of my spirit was hanging above the river because it was so scary that moment right before I died. And I thought I died. I had left my body and I didn't feel quite the same until I brought that piece back home. That was really important. Then after I finally got health insurance, I was having a lot of pain on that side, radiating up my back and my leg. We think it could have been sepsis. I needed to go on antibiotics. I finally had some medical attention. They sent me to one hospital for initial testing. And right afterwards, they just said, we can't see anything. So we think you're good to go. And then at that point, we had the kayaks on top of the car. And I said, well, I just got the green light. Let's throw the kayaks back into the water. This is about 4-6 weeks later after this happened. And we went kayaking and I had another out of body experience a couple weeks later that I believe integrated this. And I'll tell you why. So I started to have these experiences after the near death experience where I kept feeling like I was going to like throw up and pass out. And I would start to get really dizzy and I'd have to lay down or I would start to black out. And this was happening everywhere and all the time, pretty consistently. And I was in the kayak when it started to happen. And I put my hands and my feet in the water and I tried to balance myself so I wouldn't sway off to the side. And they told my partner right away, this is what I feel like might happen. And I just kept splashing myself with water and trying to regulate my body temperature. Because at this point, we had kayaked quite a bit, maybe a mile down a meandering creek, that there was, again, no solid ground to get out on. And when I would start to have these episodes, I would leave my body and then look down at it. So I never actually went to another place, but I would observe myself below. And when that happened the first time, and it went on about maybe 12 times for over a course of 6 hours, I began to leave my body, look down, and I was met with my angels and guides, and they were hanging out with me. And they said, they joked with me. They said, you know, you started all of this. And they teased me because I was the one that said I wanted to go do this. And they said, you opened up this storyline, you opened up this experience, and now we have to close it. So as I was taken out of my body and hovering down and reflecting, they showed me that I came there to do deeper healing work, and now it was time to do it. And I needed to be taken out of my body into this divine experience, because I moved out of New York City, where I was more connected to the medicine scene, and I wasn't having those experiences. It's almost like they needed to be recreated without medicine on a similar wavelength so that I could get the messages. So the message was, you need to heal the ancestral wounds by forgiving those who wronged your ancestors. And it was then that I saw a vision of my ancestor, John Rolfe, who married Pocahontas. He had two other men that I truly believe that she was sex trafficked in England to several different colonial men that she was in community of. And there was a lot of a shame of sexual abuse, something that I've experienced in my childhood that felt like some of those traumas that were being recreated that I know has happened to my sister and my father and other people within our family on that side. And there was this forgiveness that was needed, where I saw my ancestor, these men that had taken her away from her family, by the way, because she was married and she had two kids that were then murdered right before they took her to England. Her true story is really very intense. It's not the Disney princess version that I would love to identify with. But in this, I saw these men that had wronged her, and I saw their mothers crying, saying, how could they do this? How could they harm the feminine? How could they harm the indigenous who opened up their arms to welcome trade and welcome connection? And then I saw my ancestor's face again, the one I saw on the other side. And he said, it's time for us to forgive them. You need to forgive them. And once there was a forgiveness, there was a clearing. And I could see the shame that was lifting from the indigenous part of my ancestry, from the white colonizer part of my ancestry. And it was then that I began to do some healing work for Pocahontas, for her father, for her tribe, who tragically lost her in so many different ways when she was pulled from the community, and also when she was murdered on her way back to see her family after she had been in England, giving birth to who was my ancestor. So I am related through some of that trauma and truly what I believe was non-consensual experiences. So I feel like I'm related to like the rape child, essentially. And I don't actually know if John Rolfe was my ancestor based on what I've learned about how I do believe that she was handled by multiple men in that community in England. Mm-hmm. So it was a forgiveness for these patterns that had been handed down that I had seen in my ancestry. And so for a period of a couple hours, there was more downloads about why I needed to be with a partner who I've now been with for 4.5 years. He was the one that saved my life. We're in really happy, healthy relationship that is way different from anything else I've experienced, which helps me to see that I did break the cycle and that there was a big shift from those patterns that I had been bringing through my relationships. But the biggest thing that they showed me was he's part colonizer, part Native American. And so it was important that he needed to be part of that. There was a period of time where I went through this like teenage angst, anger against the white man. Like, I'm white. I'm mostly white, right? I appear mostly white. And I had mostly dated white men until I married my Caribbean ex-husband. And there was all of this anger towards the white. I couldn't explain, but was explained to me through that process that I was processing the racial anger within me that was part of my bloodline, and that I only wanted to date someone who was brown because that felt like I was disrupting the pattern, but somehow I needed to become aware that that was just part of what I had inherited, the anger, all of the feelings, the distrust, the betrayal. So after that, I went to the hospital the next day after that experience. And they found that there was a rupture site for the ovary. They couldn't really explain what happened. This is not normal. They didn't really know what to do. They put me on some antibiotics. I was urinating blood at that time, come that next day. So a lot was going on in my body to process it. But 3 years later, I'm in a different place physically. Although my body has taken me up to the edge to remind me that I have to be on this path and that I can't steer away and get distracted, and that it's important to do this work. Because I was a shamanic practitioner for 15 years, and during that relationship, I fell off the wagon. I was not seeing clients in the same degree. I got another non-traditional job while I saw clients, but made my main focus like that 9 to 5, which was not in alignment. And all of my being was saying it's time to break free from these patterns for myself, but lean into the work of really helping to liberate those who are held back from those ancestral patterns that sabotage their romantic relationships, that keep attracting the patterns in partnership that remind them of their family lineage, whether they're conscious of it or not, because we don't get off the hamster wheel of those patterns unless we consciously break them on a soul and spiritual level. And they truly believe that our ancestors chose every single person who is here now, especially those who are listening, because they're here to be the curse breakers and to heal the ancestral wounds that our ancestors just didn't have the opportunity, the space, the tools to access to heal. And they think that we're in a unique time where people love going to therapy. It's good to have a therapist. It's good to see a healer. Reiki is amazing. We have so many tools that are available to us now that is unique to generations before us. And so I truly believe that this is the moment to come into alignment, because we've inherited a lot. Our ancestors weren't able to purge that, and we are here to really transmute that so that we can identify what is our true purpose. Why are we here? That is not buried beneath the layers of what we've been given.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know that so many of our people tuning into this are um, also identify as the curse breakers, the lineage healers. And this is something that I don't think it was our last episode. It might have been 2 episodes ago when we spoke with Dr. Oscar Perez. His work is really wonderful. He talked about the term that he calls the grief bearer of the lineage, the person who is here to hold and to reconcile and alchemize that collective ancestral trauma and grief. So if you're tuning into this and you didn't catch that episode, go back and tune in to our conversation with Oscar. It was fabulous. It was one of my favorites, and it's totally related to what we're talking about here with you today, Kristen. Absolutely. This ancestral work is so deep, and I love that, you're weaving in a lot of pieces here together. We're talking about soul retrieval. We're talking about our ancestral trauma. We're talking about the ways that this manifests in our 3D life through our relationships, how we're, the relationship that we have to our shamanic practice. For all of us, I guarantee you, for every single person who's tuning into this, if you have a shamanic practice or an energy healing practice, we've all had those push-pull moments. We've all had those like, I'm gonna quit, like I'm walking away moments. And we usually get a tug back in some form or another. Sometimes it's in the form of a health crisis or a physical healing journey, like what you are sharing about. Sometimes it's someone coming into our life with the right advice at the right time. Sometimes it's we go look at I always joke my backup job is at New Seasons, which is our local like hippie grocery store chain, which I love. I love New Seasons. It's my favorite store. But we go in and we're like, oh no, this is actually not my place. Even though I love it here, this is not my place. And then to really sit in the seat of power that we hold as the the service that we are here to offer, and know that at times it may be very, very uncomfortable, and it may ask a lot of us, like it has asked so much of you. And it also is part of how we're here, not only for us, but we're here for our lineage and the collective experience as well. Thank you, Kristen. Amazing.
Kristen, I want to ask something that kind of poked out at me in your storytelling. we hear a lot on the healing journey about forgiveness. And sometimes we're told, you have to forgive these people. Sometimes we're told, well, you forgive in your own time, you forgive when it's right, you can't force forgiveness, this whole process. And just hearing you talk about the kind of this really intensive lineage, multi-generational experience around forgiveness and around how impactful that was and how key and important that was to your healing and transformation. I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit more about your relationship to forgiveness now. How do you can you just speak about it, and like how do you relate to it when with your clients and when they're struggling with forgiveness and what it means on this journey?
That's a really good question. And I've been thinking about this recently. People ask about what is the biggest thing that you've changed? Have your intuitive abilities increased or has anything shifted? And something that I've realized they didn't put together, but I was thinking about the last couple of days of how there was grudges that they held in the past. They tried to release, but sometimes you really want to do the forgiveness thing and you still feel like there's a part of you that's like holding on, be like, yeah, I'm still upset about that thing. Right. Clearly you can hear that part of me that has been within me. And I realized that there were things that bothered me, certain people that triggered me. And now that I think about it, there's a lot of things that they released. And as I think about that, I think that when there was a forgiveness that happened for my ancestors, there was a deeper forgiveness that happened through different levels of my life that were unconscious. That wasn't consciously summoning and thinking of that person and releasing them, but where there used to be wounds around feeling rejected or feeling kicked out of a community or feeling like there was like jealousy within someone and them not wanting to be my friend anymore, whatever the story was, those people I don't feel any pull with. I feel love. It's been just replaced with this deep love and excitement when I see that person's name pop up or hear about them, where there used to be that like, oh, that pain of that friend breakup or whatever that thing was that happened. Now there's like a curiosity of like, I wonder how they are. I love them so much. I'm so grateful for all the lessons that were there. So without thinking about it, I think that there was a deeper forgiveness that happened in more places of my life that were unconscious. But now when I think about anyone that I've had any beef with, I don't feel any beef. I just feel a lot of joy, which I hadn't put together before. But I think I'm sort of getting like a message from my guides right now that sometimes that lack of forgiveness or the grudge is something that's deeper, that's not even yours, that goes back even further. And I think that with that anger towards the white man, that anger towards whatever I was feeling in my DNA that was beyond what I can conceptualize, I think that there was a big release, not just for myself. I was forgiving on behalf of my ancestors, and that felt effortlessly because I didn't have the experience of being Pocahontas, feeling that experience, being her brother and sister who saw her die on the ship when she was poisoned, right? I didn't have that same level of connection to that part of the story. I didn't know the characters as well to feel so enmeshed with them. But now when I think about it, after that deep forgiveness that felt effortless, it feels like I've been released from all of the other places where my soul was holding on to anything. Even my ex-mother-in-law, there was so much grief there, just because for a while I almost blamed that connection because it felt like she was the wrecking ball that came in that reminded me of my father, even any grudge that I would have held against anyone in my family, just my immediate family. All of that's gone. I don't even have access to it. Instead, there's just a lot of light and joy. And so I think having that forgiveness piece that went back further beyond unlocked me from other places where I was stuck and not able to forgive, which just goes to show that sometimes what we're holding on to really isn't ours and it has nothing to do with us. But if that's a pattern that's learned and a place where we've held on to because there's a soul wound there, then it just repeats itself. And then
Yeah.
we become the puppets strung up by the patterns that feels like it's just beyond us, that we're just playing out the play and we're just, different characters in the same show.
Absolutely. There's, I pull this under the umbrella of our soul codes and energy signatures work. And I support clients in working with the archives, meaning like what are the specific agreements that you have in your soul contract and your soul codes that you may not be aware of, that perhaps either you made in a previous incarnation or your lineage made, and you're just carrying that through until it is rewritten, until it is renegotiated or restructured, or the architecture of the fundamental core of your being is remodeled as you experienced. And then it does ripple into effect in ways that sometimes we can predict and sometimes we have no idea how it will manifest. I'm curious. I want to ask you about your activation that you received, and maybe you spoke to some of this already. But when you experienced your ancestor coming to touch you, and in I think you said your solar plexus or your sternum, and you felt this energy coming through, was that activation the forgiveness that you were talking about? Was there something else that was activated? Can you tell us more about that aspect?
Yeah, the forgiveness came later. That was a
Okay.
couple weeks later when I was kayaking again, because this girl didn't learn her lesson the first time. I still haven't stayed away from the rivers and kayaking. But
Mm.
the solar plexus activation, that was so powerful. And I say that because it happened on a spiritual, energetic level, because it happened on the other side.
Mhm.
But I'll tell you, my partner was really perplexed. He thought for a moment that I had a seizure when I was in the kayak, when I was out of body, unconscious. He said that at one point, my arms flailed out to the side when they were touching my solar plexus and there was an activation. He said my body responded and he thought I was going to go into a shake. I didn't bite my tongue. I didn't do any of the other signatures of a seizure. But the way that my body behaved in that moment when he was having trouble like reading a pulse and
Mhm.
wasn't sure if I was going to stay, he said I just went cold. I went like white. He couldn't feel much of a pulse. And I apparently had that activation in my physical body. So that makes me believe that there was some translation from the spiritual, from the divine, that went into me on a cellular level. And that's what I kept hearing. This is sort of this activation in your cells. And it literally felt like if anyone's had that like beautiful peak orgasm, it was that, but in every cell of my body. And it just felt like all of my being was filled with light. And when I meditate into that, because I can still access that feeling, even if it's dulled and dimmed down quite a bit, I can still access that place and like, woof, it just feels like, woof, this
Mhm.
beautiful vortex, this beautiful source of energy within me that I can access that just feels like it was a reset, almost
Mhm.
like a reset in my energy, a reset in my power. And I don't
Mhm.
know if I have words to really say much more of the transition other than there was a shift and an activation, and they sent me back with it. And they said, you have a work to do. And it's
Yeah.
to help other people these ancestral wounds. And I had been doing all of the work emotionally, as many layers as I could pry with the tools that I had before I went on the kayak on this journey. But it was almost like it was a culmination, a moment in time where I was taken out of my body to have this spiritual divine experience, to be infused back in body, to be sent back on earth and go do the thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. I had one of those, which was not nearly as dramatic as yours, but and now that I think I haven't thought about this in quite a while, but hey, if y'all are tuning in, leave us a comment if this has happened to you. I guess this is a thing, or this makes sense that this is a thing. I remember in 2017, I was out running, and this was a time in my life when I was doing a lot of long distance running. And I ran all the time. I have great balance. I'm good on my feet. I'm very agile. And I tripped on something that was maybe like a quarter of an inch high, like on something that I would never normally trip on. And I remember, and I could not catch my balance. And I had this sensation like I was flying for a second. And it was this very weird, timeless, like, boom, kind of bubbling space time experience. And that just felt very timeless. And then, bam, I hit the ground. And I remember thinking, gosh, that was so weird. Like, it was very weird that I tripped on something like nothing. I even went back to look. I was like, there was nothing there for me to trip on, but something tripped me. And I couldn't catch myself, which is again also unusual because occasionally, like I was running on like in a snowstorm on ice and I didn't fall on the ice. I was like slipping around, but I didn't fall. And then in meditation later, I was asking about that, and I was told that, oh, we just needed you to pop out of your body for a second so we could, we meaning my spirit team, so we could go give you this activation. And there was an activation that they needed me to clear out for a moment so they could slide this on in there. And I remember I had a conversation with my guides. I was like, okay, well, next time I want to come up with a different way to do this in the future because that was very uncomfortable. And I ended up like really seriously hurting my shoulder with how I landed on it. Anyway, in terms of, yeah, having the spirit, having the animating force leave the body and go into some kind of different plane in order for there to be some sort of infusion of energy or activation. Um,
And what
yeah.
shifted for you with your activation? What do you feel like that was more deeply about?
That was a period of time in which I actually received several activations within a short period of time. That was one that was really related to my mediumship and channeling abilities. And I had already been working with developing my mediumship and channeling. And this was specifically working with other classes of beings, including the galactics. And it was really hard for me to grapple with that one because I really did not like how they handled that situation with respect to my bioform Earth body. And so that one was very challenging for me to integrate and required a lot of like coming into very clear and impeccable relationship with my mediumship practice, which I think is now that I look at it, I'm like, oh, that was really great for me to develop the skill and the impeccability and the hygiene that I now have in my mediumship practice as a result of this very uncomfortable and injurious experience. But it was also in conjunction, like within probably a month or two of the first big dragon activation I had. So there was two or three, no, it was three activations within like probably a 3 month period. And that was the first one that now that I say it that way and look at it that way, it's like, oh, that was probably also helping to tee up the other ones and open the channel for that to happen. So thank you for asking because I just put that together right now. Yeah.
Love when that happens.
Yeah.
So,
How about you, Kat?
yeah,
Have you ever like been popped out of your body for an activation?
sure. Yeah, absolutely. But
All the time.
what I want to
Yeah.
talk, what I really want to talk about, because, uh, for our listeners, um, w- we're hearing these stories and we're hearing this is some intensive stuff. This is I didn't know I signed up for this kind of stuff, which for some people might be interesting, it might be intimidating, it might be like, oh my gosh, I've started on this path. Is this what I have to look forward to? It might be like, well, this hasn't happened to me, so am I not doing this right? Like, there's so much that when we hear these kinds of stories, whether we can relate to them in one way or another or not, we're maybe comparing ourselves or trying to understand on our path, how does this storytelling help help the individual on this path. So usually we try to offer some kind of tools, some 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 ways that if maybe we're having something that's this intense going on, or we're wondering if this is supposed to be what's happening, it's not, you know I'm just curious, Kristen, as you work with your people and you're, having people going through these deep soul level, lineage level healing experiences, what are the tools for both maybe helping yourself to prepare for this level of healing or activation? Because what I'm hearing from both of you talking about these things happening 3.5 years ago, 2017, you guys both are long-term practitioners. You've been in your practice for a long period of time before these specific events have happened. So how do we manage and prepare and then support when these kinds of initiations are coming in?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Easy question,
Um,
right?
Oh,
the
Kat, you're on fire today. You're coming in hot with all the wonderful questions. Thank you. That's great.
The cold. I have a
well,
head cold. It's helpful.
Okay.
right, everything's up there. Your channel is clear.
You're great.
We're clearing. The first thing that popped into my mind as you were saying that, Kat, is that it reminds me of when someone does a power animal journey and they're like, oh, I wanted the tiger, but instead I got the snail. And they get really bummed out of like, why does my journey look like this when someone else's journey looks like that? And just like when we connect with our animal spirits or whatever form our guides show up in, they have a specific wisdom based on what their medicine is. And if we compare those two different things, we miss out on the message and what it's truly here to bring us. And the message that came through while you were sharing that and saying, well, are people supposed to be preparing this, or how do they prepare for whatever comes up for them? The message I keep hearing is, how can we take anything that happens to us, especially those things that crack us open, and feel bad, feel hard? Those challenges are what change us, but they can also be what transforms us. So if we lean into every experience that feels complicated, challenging, like a pressure, if we ask, how is this for us? What is the medicine in this? Instead of, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening for me? We get the fast track of the healing, right? If that's really what our guides are here to show us, that there's an opening or a cracking open. My first divorce, it felt like I built this picture perfect life, what everyone was supposed to have, trying to create that white picket fence of everything I wanted that I didn't have when I was growing up. And it felt like the rug was pulled out from underneath of me. And it's like I couldn't have the dream of what I had because it wasn't the dream that my soul was dreaming. It was a dream of someone else's that wasn't really mine and wasn't going to get me on the right path to do the more fulfilling work and my purpose. So when we have these challenges that happen, how can we lean into what the medicine is in there and how it's trying to redirect us instead of fighting the redirection when it is for our highest good? Now, I also listen to a lot of other near-death experiencers because they get it. And for a long time, I just needed to find that community that I could resonate with, that I felt seen and heard within, since it's a very isolating experience to have when no one else knows what it's like to die and want to go back there. Because for a period of time, I was longing for that place of oneness and feeling like, oh, the body hurts. I got to be here in this. Nah. Yeah. But what I've found to be consistent with so many different recollections of their near-death experiences, that when they have their life review or they connect in with their guides on the other side that support them through that transition, they have this reflection of, I decided to have this accident or this death happen at a pivotal moment so that we could make a choice. Do we just leave now, or do we really step into something that's more meaningful, which usually is more spiritual or of service or creating a message that needs to transmission and needs to come home to the people here who aren't having that experience? So what if we don't have to go on the other side to go through the painful thing that can take years to recalibrate from and heal from physically? What if we can just get that transmission through the experience that's cracking us open? Because if our spirit on some level divined on the timeline that we were supposed to have this experience to crack us open, why not lean into the medicine instead of prolonging the suffering? Then we get the fast track to the healing, to jumping the timeline, to having the activation. It doesn't have to look like a painful near-death experience that takes years to integrate. it can be the experience of, why am I being redirected now? Why is this cracking me open? Because that's the place where we transform through. And this is where we are the most connected to spirit, when we are cracked open in this way.
Yeah. So for our listeners, it might not look like this. It might look like losing your job, or having someone close to you pass, or having to move out of a place that you really love, like things that sometimes we discount the medicine of our experience. We go, oh, well, it's just this thing and it's just like sucks, but whatever. And what I'm hearing from you is that there's this opportunity, even in everything, in every moment, that this is the practice, right? That whenever you're coming across these moments in life where it seems like it's coming against you, it seems like bad luck. A lot of times, I'm sure you get this, but a lot of times I hear from people who are like, oh my gosh, I'm cursed. I have bad karma. I have bad luck. I have this going on. And it seems like there's this opportunity to be in the practice all the time of seeing that, oh, even the small things, maybe the small, like I couldn't get a parking place close to where I was supposed to park, and now I saw a butterfly, and isn't that beautiful? But kind of seeing those little moments every single day where we shift that mindset and awareness and start the practice, so that, yeah, if something big happens, you've already worked the muscle where you can start to relate to your experience in a different way and mine it and get that medicine and understand it at a really deep level, through the practice of seeing things from that perspective of, perhaps one of the things that I work with is being grateful for the experience of the sensations of, wow, when I'm having something that feels painful or sad, or I often will remind myself of how grateful I am that I have this body that feels so much, that I have this heart that's capable of breaking so much, that I have these tears, and how much tears can be cried, and how messy it can be, and how cathartic and gross that it is such a blessing that it even exists. So that's something that I work with. Michelle, do you have one that's sort of in this vein of how do you the like practice tool for eventually getting through the big thing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say very much in the same vein as what you said of like listen to the whispers before it becomes a shout or a smack in the head. Because our like it's not that spirit is only communicating with us in like select few ways. Like there are bajillions of messages coming through in all sorts of forms, but if we're not practiced at listening or receiving them, or being curious even, then we're not going to hear the subtle communications. But I really do believe that, and of course, I'm I'm not saying that there was any density necessarily that I needed to be reached by snapping me out of my body, and maybe there was, or maybe for Kristen, who yes was already an experienced practitioner by the time that you had your near-death experience, but the layers of density that you're talking about of this ancestral healing were very deep, very profound. So maybe it had to happen in that way. But for a lot of communications and a lot of things, they may not necessarily need to happen in a way that you get hit by a bus and then need to evaluate your life. And so when we start to pay attention, and I think there's that balance between being curious but not over meaning making. Like there are some things that happen in our lives that it's like, okay, well, we don't necessarily need to, like, I don't know. I think there's that dance between be open but not hyper vigilant. Don't work yourself into a tizzy because, oh, my partner said something and then I sneezed. Like, what does that mean? Like, just, you could have just sneezed and it's okay. Rather than this almost like, yeah, I can't really articulate it better than that, other than like awareness of the balance of how to engage with our lives and with the communications that are coming in from spirit. There's looking for repeat patterns in particular. Sometimes a message can come through once, and I usually wait for a couple of repeat messages, because sometimes a message comes through once and it's like, okay, cool, I'm noticing that, thank you. And then it comes through again, okay, I'm noticing that, thank you. But do I necessarily need to take action on it, or am I just noticing it? Do I need to say something, or is it for right now, or is it for later? And then it comes through a third time. I'm like, okay, I got it. Like, I'm noticing the pattern. Maybe there's an action necessary, and maybe it's timely for right now. But all of that is part of this discernment that we develop through being in this continuous fluency of communication with our ancestors, with our higher selves, with our spirit team. And the only way that you develop that is through practice. So as I mentioned, my experience that I had of being really snapped out of my body and then put back in my body, again, I already had a mediumship practice at that point, but I think there was a fluency in the communication and a really deep settling into my own power here as an incarnate person that was different than what I had been previously doing. And I think that's a piece, Kristen, I'm reading between the lines a little bit here on what you're talking about, but I think there is this unique position that we're in as incarnate beings here in this earth realm at this time, where you here in your body right here, right now, as the living, breathing manifestation of your lineage in this moment, in the context that you're living in the work that you're doing, have kind of this convergence of tools and energy where you're able to not only live out the patterns and get to see the patterns, but have the tools to change them. And whereas, I don't know your sister or your father, but, they may not have that, for example. And I know that for our listeners tuning in, maybe you already have a meditation practice. Maybe you already have a mediumship practice, a spiritual practice. And now there just happens to be this really beautiful convergence of you as the manifest prayers and the manifest traumas of your lineage, or having the spiritual agreements that you do, being served up this opportunity that may perhaps be very uncomfortable and may challenge you greatly and may require you to embody yourself and choose your life in a different way than you ever have before. That's part of the medicine that I received from my little getting kicked out of my body. Was it actually really demanded that I inhabit myself and my incarnate life much more fully, because I decided I wasn't okay with a spirit kicking me out of my body because they wanted to activate something. So that was a big part of that medicine that has dramatically changed the way in which I relate to my team. So those are some pieces that I would offer to people who are in this inquiry. Kristen, I want to ask you also, I know that you are passionate about supporting others in their ancestral healing. Can you tell us a little bit more about some ways that you're doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of this unfolding of the vision that I was given was to really help people in a deeper way. So I do the one-on-one work and really help people. My specialty has really become helping people unlock patterns in relationships so that they can be more available for healthy, happy partnerships based on unraveling these wounds wherever they originate in, whether they're childhood wounds, ancestral, sometimes they're past life. All of those things come in based on what the intention is and what really needs to heal by following that thread where it needs to go to the original wound. But I am putting together a very special retreat in January of 2026 to help people within that container to transform those patterns so that they can step more fully into happier, healthy relationships and their purpose. Because when we have all this ancestral junk that we've inherited and no one else was cleaning it up for multiple lifetimes, multiple generations, then it's harder for us to get in tune with what we're really here to do. And they truly believe that we all have a purpose inside of us. And if it's buried so deeply, and every time we try to move towards our goals and everything pulls us back to a pattern of the past, it's pulling us back so that we pay attention to where there's still a little bit of healing that needs to be done. so that we can really liberate our ancestors, because they can be our allies. But if they're hurt, if they're stuck in pain, if they still have loss that you have inherited, we can't really have them help you to the degree that they can support you unless we can really heal their wounds. It's almost like ghosts with unfinished business, right? We say ghosts hang around because there's something that they're still attached to that they need to resolve. And if we don't help them to resolve that, which is really what we need to resolve for ourselves, because we've just inherited it and it's playing out in our own lives in some way, then we aren't really able to jump into the next vision for ourselves as cleanly and as clearly with all the support that wants to hold us, if we can't go back to where we're already being pulled back. So I say that if anyone experiences these patterns, if you can say, oh, it's emotionally unavailable partners, and I've experienced that through childhood, and my mom experienced that at home, right? We start to unravel these patterns and see how many generations that we can see they go back. And sometimes we feel like we're being puppeted by a pattern that's not even ours, and we don't really know where the origin is. And that's when we know, and we might have to look back a little bit more deeply than what our childhood memories share. And so when we're able to really clean those up and clear those patterns, we become very available. All of our energy is restored to us and brought back, so that we are a full, complete being with all of the tools, all of the confidence, and all of the momentum of the ancestors standing behind us to really step more clearly into what we are here to do and what our soul mission is. And so I'm hosting a retreat that's really all about clearing the way, healing those old layers, liberating the ancestors so that they can stand with you as we clarify your purpose and heal your interpersonal relationships as a result of clearing up all of what you have inherited unconsciously or consciously, so that you can really feel clear, complete, standing in your power, and ready to embody your purpose.
Amazing. And this retreat is in Costa Rica, right?
Yep, it's in
Yeah.
Costa Rica, 7 days and 6 nights. We're going to be doing some volcano excursions, some waterfall hikes, and then a lot of deep inner work on campus in a beautiful
Beautiful.
space in central Costa Rica in the cloud forest.
Amazing. And for all of you listening in, we'll have all of Kristen's links and everywhere that you can check out her work and sign up for the retreat or get more info about the retreat in the comments or the episode text of the episode, so you can go check that out. Awesome. Kristen, any final words of wisdom you want to leave our people with?
Yeah, we talked about how some people might feel like, why haven't my activations looked this big or that powerful? And I just want to say, that's really hard work. And you don't have to have the hard lessons that just wipe you out for years. I mean, honestly, I had health concerns for a very long time that terrified me. And it can look glamorous to have these experiences, but you can have these micro experiences if you just listen to the whispers of your guidance, and you don't have to be hit by the 2x4 because they smacked you and they tapped you and they whispered to you and you didn't listen. So I don't want to glorify the intensity of not fully pivoting when your soul is asking you to, and to honor that every moment, every reminder, every synchronicity that realigns you with your path or that's guiding you forward, trust that. Know that there are very gentle ways to get the message. And sometimes that's something to celebrate, that you don't have to go through the really hard stuff to get the message and the memo. And spirit talks to us in all sorts of ways, and to honor how all of that comes, and not to glorify one person's path or the way that that looks over what is truly meant for you, because your soul divined it anyway. So just keep on your path. Your guides will show you, and you already know.
Amazing. I want to put like rainbow stickers on that for everyone thinking like, oh man, I want a big, like glamorous near-death experience. No, you don't. You, if you can avoid it, then just listen to the subtle taps, really. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thanks, Kristen. It was so lovely to have you. And really, thanks for sharing so much of your story.
Yeah. Kristen, thank you. Thank you. I am so grateful to have you here. And for all of you tuning in, Kristen is a wonderful practitioner. She is one, in addition to Kat, who is one of my go-to shaman sisters, Kristen is another practitioner who I am so honored to have in my close council of trusted people. So I do highly, like, triple underline recommend that you go check out her work. She's such a stellar not only stellar human, but also like her work is really impeccable. So please go check it out. And again, we'll put all her info in the show notes. Kat, let's take a moment and share what we got going on. I know you have things going on. I do too. I have a course that's upcoming starting in middle of November, the Foundations of Shamanism. And this is an 11-week course working with principles of energetic mastery, how to cultivate your energy body and practice the skills of energetic fluency that will allow you to safely navigate the unseen realms and communicate with your spirit council, how to work with your earth-based ritual and ceremonial practice, and tools for shamanic journeying safely and effectively. So you can find more about that on my website, michellehawk.com. That's the Foundations of Shamanism course. And I do currently also have space for one-on-one people if you want healing or mentorship support. Kat, what do you have going on?
Great. I would say number one is that the Healer's Process Practice Manual, I have my like not real versions, but my Healer's Process Practice Manual is out. So you can get both books now and be able to follow along with the 50 practices that are referenced in the first book. The Heal Thyself program, which is going to be 12 sessions of a lot of self-healing, activation, somatic, shamanic, spirit, movement, breath, sound work to activate the healer within, starts November 22nd. And then there's going to be more courses after that. I have my whole calendar scheduled out through the springtime. I need to put it on my website, katherinebird.com. But if you're interested in what else I have going on, I've got a new program coming out in January, Restoration of the Western Soul, really looking at Western people and our ancestral lineages and our mystical traditions and practices, and looking at integrating those into our current movement forward, so we can become radical contributions to the planet. And I've got business course coming out in February and Open Your Channel in the spring. So there's a lot of opportunities for different programs. And then, of course, if you're interested in one-on-one work, we can always chat about that.
Amazing. All right, Kristen, thank you so much for being here. It was such a pleasure to talk with you, and y'all check out her work. See you next time.
Bye.